One of the biggest bits of news that's not particularly breaking is that we may be close to the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. It's essentially an amendment to the Constitution that says you can't take issues of sex into, you can't discriminate on the basis of sex. I'll read you the actual language here. But there's a bit of a controversy going on right now. For the most part, probably not going to happen. So let me explain. The Equal Rights Amendment was made by feminists back in 1921, and the language currently reads, Section 1. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of sex. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. The amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. I'm sorry, it was proposed in 1923, not 21, known as the Lucretia Mott Amendment. Here's the thing. Back then, we didn't have the Civil Rights Act of, I think, 1964, was it? It was 64? Anyway, the point is, we didn't have the Civil Rights Act, so people were proposing an amendment. The amendment didn't make it. However, in 1972, I believe, they actually voted for a decent amount, but with an expiration date of 1982. Well, it's long since passed since then, but Virginia has become the latest state, the 38th, to ratify the ERA. And now there's an argument that this means we should be allowed to push it forward. Unfortunately, for the proponents of the ERA, it's just way too late. I mean, 1982, that was a long time ago. So your 30-year-old plan, look, you've got to do a new ratification from all of the states, which likely just won't happen. But here's the big story I want to get to. First, I will read this to you. This is the breaking news. Virginia moves to the brink of becoming the 38th state to ratify the ERA. So let me correct. They didn't vote for it. They may vote for it. More importantly, as of today, the feminists, many feminists are really pushing for the Equal Rights Amendment, not realizing it actually could hurt them very much so. You see, the time at which the ERA was being proposed was very, very different. And if you impose a constitutional amendment saying you can't discriminate on the basis of sex, you could actually take away federal funding from, say, Planned Parenthood. You could end certain programs. It could be wacky. We got to think about this one. It could backfire horribly. And let me explain to you why. First, let me read a little bit of the story. They say this. The votes in the House and the Senate carried enormous symbolic weight and showed how much once solidly conservative Virginia had changed. Okay, so actually, let me go back. All right. Virginia moved to the brink of becoming the crucial 38th state to ratify the ERA on Wednesday, a momentous victory for many women's rights advocates, even though it is far from certain the measure will ever be added to the Constitution. The affirmative votes in both chambers of the Virginia legislature came decades after Congress sent the ERA to the states in 1972, passing it with bipartisan support. However, they didn't get enough states to ratify, and the date has passed. But a member of the grassroots VA Ratify ERA group that's worked on it says we're euphoric. The state has undergone seismic political shifts due to the increasing diversity and growing activism and political power of women. Democrats who retook control of the legislature in November made passing the ERA a top priority after Republicans blocked it for years. I bring you now to Vox.com. The drive to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment explained. Virginia is about to ratify the amendment. Here's what that means for the country. And let me add the things they miss. And first, stress. I believe we're looking at a tremendous backfire for feminists. I believe that if they ratify this, if it really did go to the Constitution, we would see the stripping of women's rights across the board because the language and laws produced today would be in violation of that amendment. I'll give you one example. It says that you cannot discriminate. Actually, let me go to the fact from the Equal Rights Amendment website. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Okay, let's make an argument. In the Vox article, they say this. They talk about the history of it, things we already know. They say, let me go down. It will guarantee gender equality in the Constitution for the first time. There are laws in the books that ban sex discrimination in some arenas. The Equal Pay Act, for example, requires that men and women get equal pay for equal work. But Foy noted, laws can be changed just as easily as legislators change their minds. A constitutional amendment is more permanent. Moreover, an amendment would give people more tools when they challenge discriminatory laws or practices in court. Federal courts have interpreted the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment as conferring some protection against sex discrimination, Martin said. But adding an explicit ban on such discrimination in the Constitution would likely force courts to take the issue more seriously. People could use the ERA to challenge anything from unequal pay to restrictions on abortion, Martin said. And it wouldn't just affect women's rights. By banning discrimination on the basis of sex, it could implicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity as well, offering protections to gay and trans people regardless of gender. Full stop. It could do the exact opposite. Let me tell you this. The government funds certain programs. If the government was only funding a program for women, would that be discrimination on the basis of sex? Technically, no, up until a man says, I would like those same programs. If the government does not offer it to both sexes, it would be discrimination. So I'll give you a better example. There was a recent ruling. I don't have the details pulled up, but there was a ruling that said it's not discrimination to have a woman's only course if a man's only course of equal, weight was offered. So if you did a woman in science special event, that's not discrimination if you also have a men in science special event, because men and women both have the opportunity to attend a special event. That actually makes sense. I agree with that. Because if you did an event that was like, how women should do backflips, well, women and men, might have different techniques or something like that. In which case, make sure both sexes have access to a program for learning backflips, but being trained by people who could tell a woman or a man how to do it, because men and women are physically different. But here's the problem. They say restrictions on abortion. Well, I then assert to you, potential argument. Now, I'm not a legal scholar or constitutional scholar, but it's just an idea. So maybe I'm wrong. And if you think I'm wrong, comment below or on the podcast or wherever you may be. Restrictions on abortion. Okay, well, the federal government provides funding to certain organizations, say Planned Parenthood, for instance. I know there was a big thing recently. They lost a lot of funding. Well, let's just say this. There has been, my understanding is there's been a law stopping the federal government from funding abortion for a long time. But women's services in general, if they do not provide comparable services to men or can't, then could you argue that's discrimination? I think there's a potential. I mean, you could argue it, absolutely. Would you win? I don't know. But I'll put it this way. If they offered breast cancer screenings to women, would they then have to also offer breast cancer screenings to men? And if they said, we could, but it's not a mammogram or something because men don't have, developed breast tissue like women, would it then be discriminatory for the government to fund a program only for women? The answer is, well, you could argue it. I don't know how the courts would rule. The court might rule that women are biologically different, but that brings me to the trans question. And therein lies the big problem. The answer is, this could upend the legal precedent and system as we know it and backfire horribly. They say you can't discriminate. Well, actually, let me get the language of the amendment as best I can. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of sex. Well, equality of rights. The way I would interpret this, not as, I'm not a judge or a legal scholar, is that there can't be a law specifically referencing only one sex because that would be abridging the rights of some one person. Could you then even have, bills protecting women? Could you then even have programs for women at colleges? If you had a, get women to, join STEM, you'd have to have a get men to join STEM too. Now, it's entirely possible because of the 1964, I believe it's 64, Civil Rights Act, you can already do these things, and nobody really has. So we'll see what happens. But I would put it this way. First, the most important thing I wanted to bring up with this segment is, I know it's probably boring. I know probably most people probably don't care. Whatever. I think it's really interesting, and I've been wanting to talk about the ERA for a while because we've been getting to this point where Virginia now swinging blue means this might be ratified. But there are a lot of laws that we don't know how they will be affected if this amendment comes into play. Some people might actually say that, there are certain laws specifically designed for women in the case of, like assault, and it shouldn't be that way. And a lot of people, both, left and right, agree it shouldn't either. But we're going to see a lot of dramatic changes. Is it even legal to have different bathrooms? For the most part, many places, no, because of trans rights bills. Well, this might actually result in lawsuits against that. like you can't have a bathroom for, gender, like people are going to argue crazy things. I'll put it that way. Some people say it's simply just going to be redundant, that we already have the 1964 Civil Rights Act. All this will do is stand behind it. It won't really change much. But it also means you need to consider in many jurisdictions, this could open the door for a stronger argument from, say, men's rights activists or from, contrarians who want to challenge grants programs that benefit women. If there's a scholarship for women, Gone. You can't discriminate on the basis of sex. They do say, however, it's the denial of rights. So you could theoretically be arguing if they tax both men and women and use that to fund women, they are granting women a right to an access to resources they don't grant to men. The point is, I think this is redundant and I don't think we need it. My understanding is the Constitution doesn't actually even talk about men or women for the most part. I don't think it mentions anything like this. It talks about people in general. And I'm not sure if they say the word man or not. But I know there's all men are created equal. I think it's the Declaration of Independence or whatever. I think the general idea back then was that man was referring to humans. But look, I'll put it this way. We don't know what's going to happen, but it will be largely chaotic so long as people want it to be. But I want to end with one more important thing. Things might really, really change. January 2nd, poll shows Biden is the only Democrat who would defeat Trump in Virginia. Now, Virginia flipped blue, but there's a lot of polls coming out saying it's going to revert back. There were too many people who sat out. People don't pay attention to these elections. The activists took over, and now all these 2A proponents are freaking out. Yeah, well, you got to get up and vote, and so this is going to wake people up. We'll see what happens. It's not the biggest story in the world. Whatever. I just wanted to talk about it. But I got a couple more stories that I think are more interesting related to Virginia. One more, and I will see you all in the next segment in a few minutes.